Welcome to the NAU Alumni Webinar Series, NAU Memories and Milestones, featuring Guy Tillett. I'll spend a minute here introducing Guy and then also give a little bit of overview of our early days. I've been involved in a project this last year that gives me a unique perspective, but first to Guy. Guy Tillett worked for NAU from 1965 to 2015 for nearly 50 years. He initially served as a faculty member and then in the early 70s became vice president and dean of students, and over time also served as the director of alumni relations, I think for 15 years. Yeah. He served in that capacity.
And maybe alumni services is also descriptive of who we were and what we were doing.
Absolutely.
And I'm not opposed to alumni relations, but it was services.
Yeah, and I stepped into that role, director of alumni services, which were very big shoes to fill, let me tell you. He's officially retired from NAU, but he does serve in a volunteer capacity on the nonprofit NAU Foundation Board of Directors.
That's true.
And he is the author of Milestones, the 70-year progression of National American University. And we'll get to that book in just a minute. I wanted to share a quote by our former director of marketing of NAU, Ann Bretlinger, because it really, I think, summarizes well Guy's commitment to the university and why he is really the only guy who could do this presentation with me. Guy's lived much of the history of NAU. He has experienced trying times and the success that came from persistence in pursuing a style of education not being offered by public universities. And bottom line, Guy has a passion for NAU that rivals anyone who has been involved with this university at any level.
Well, just for emphasis, I believe in who we are and what we're doing, and we're not restricted. We're doing a service to the university and to our students and employees, and I like what we do, and I'd like to be involved in that. So I think this is descriptive.
Yeah, well, I agree completely, and I'm really, really happy to have your time today and really learn from you. Every time we sit down and talk, I learn something new. I mentioned the book Milestones. This is a cover picture of that book. I wrote that 5 years ago. This past year we've celebrated our 75th anniversary, but Guy was able to very competently compile a history of our first 70 years. And if anyone would like a copy of that book, my contact information will be at the end of this presentation. I'd be happy to share. And a lot of what we talk about today came from that book. We'll start off with the early years, National School of Business. I'm going to, with Guy's interjection at any point that you'd like, kind of take over the next couple slides. I mentioned that we're celebrating our 75th anniversary, just concluded the celebration of our 75th anniversary of the founding of our school. In this past year, a big part of my effort has been finding our earliest alumni, our legacy alumni, those who graduated between 1941 and 1950. And I've had some success. I've interviewed almost 20 legacy alumni and captured their stories. In a minute, I'll share that website. But in the process of talking to these alum, I learned quite a bit about our earliest years. National School of Business was founded in 1941 by Clarence and Catherine Jacobson. Clarence was a local businessman and attorney. He was described by the graduates I spoke to as really being the salesman of the couple, the guy who went out to homes, high schools, farms, and ranches throughout South Dakota, Wyoming, and Nebraska to recruit students. He took it upon himself, as did Catherine, to find homes for the students that came to Rapid City to attend National School of Business. And even help them find jobs. Now, there was a business reason for doing that. He wanted them to be successful students, and successful students needed a way to pay for tuition and have a place to sleep. But he also cared, as did Catherine. And Catherine was the business-minded person behind the operation. She worked in the office, kept the books, made sure the students were accommodated, again, in housing and jobs, but also in the records that they needed to keep.
That photograph was labeled as 1948, and it is typical of the student body at that time. And as you can see here, it's mostly female.
Yeah.
Because we were pushing secretarial programs rather extensively. And even then, the female students were taking on other aspects of the business or a business, and that is understanding business, and they did not come here just to be a secretary.
Yeah.
Some of them did, and some of them continued that way, but they had interest in going beyond that.
Yeah.
And here on that photograph, there are, I think, 3 males out of about 20 some females, and that was typical at the time, and that was for 1948.
Yeah. And you bring up a really interesting point of history I meant to add. It was Clarence Jacobson's vision to create a school for initially women whose husbands had left for war, but then also have specialized business training in place for the veterans when they returned home from the war.
Yeah, and that, of course, is consistent with the date 1941, which is when we entered WW.
Yeah, World War II. That's right. Yep. And you had mentioned some of our earliest graduates, female graduates, not being content with a secretarial career, really doing more with their degree. Charlene is one example, but the example, and she's one of the graduates that I interviewed, 1949 graduates. You can see her circled in her in that picture. She and others like her really helped visually put together a history of our earliest years because they saved all this. She saved her the card that showed that she was a graduate of National School of Business and her graduation photo. Isla Gloom here in the color picture, she went on to be a fairly high-level executive at the Shell Oil Company. Worked for Shell for, I think, 37 years, relocating San Francisco, then to Houston before she retired, but she really went far with her National School of Business degree.
A number of the females came to us with the idea that they were going to be other than a secretary.
Yeah.
And so we needed to program the classes and instruction in order that they would not just be, and I don't mean to make that sound negative, but they didn't want to be secretaries.
Right.
They wanted business experience. And that was the nature of our curriculum. Yeah. Even then.
Yeah, well,
so I'm proud of who we are and what we've done, even then.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot these alum that I've made contact with over the last year are also very prideful of their alma mater. Moving away from the early years, Clarence Jacobson purchased the school, or I'm sorry, Harold Buckingham purchased the school from Clarence Jacobson in 1962. And
Correct.
Guy, you worked directly with Harold Buckingham.
A lot.
You joined the university just a couple years after he purchased it.
Yes. And he was the source. If I needed something relative to my responsibility or my intentions, that's where I would go. And he would support that, or he would explain to me how I may be not consistent with what they were thinking,
Mhm.
or the route that we were going to follow. And Harold was really a businessman, and that's what we were doing.
Mhm.
We were in the business, and Harold was supportive, and for me and faculty and students and graduates and everyone I can think of.
Yeah.
He was a real mover and shaker
Yeah.
for who National was at that particular time. And of course, that blossomed
Mhm.
and grew
Right.
and swelled up a little bit.
Yeah. Well, he's credited, and we'll get into we'll conclude the webinar with a look at just how much NAU has expanded over the years, but he is consistently credited for having that vision of NAU being a school whose borders expanded beyond Rapid City.
Every time I come in the front door
Yeah.
out here, I see the picture,
Yeah.
the drawing
Yeah.
of Harold Buckingham.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
that's,
He's
most people wouldn't know or understand why that's there. But I would want to emphasize that I know why it was there.
Mhm.
He was the mover and the shaker
Mhm.
on who we are and what we're doing now and then. And he was great.
Yeah.
Still is.
Yeah. Well, I had the pleasure of talking with Bob Buckingham, his son, earlier this year, and he really sort of, that conversation crystallized in my own mind really the unique blend of business person and compassionate education advocate that Harold Buckingham was. He really believed strongly that any adult who wanted the opportunity of higher education should be given that opportunity. What they did with that opportunity really then fell to the individual, but he wanted a very open door kind of policy, and to this day we have open enrollment.
Yeah, educational advocate, I think, is very descriptive
Mhm.
of who he was and what we did. And anytime I needed help or had some ideas, I could go to him,
Mhm.
and he would pick up on it.
Yeah, and the help that you often approached him with had to do with legitimate student needs.
Yeah,
Students who might, not have transportation or other challenges to make them successful in
yeah.
school.
And my responsibility was student services.
Mhm.
So things would come up, and I didn't have any way to solve it. And
Mhm.
I would go to Harold, and boom,
Mhm.
my problem would go away.
Right. Right. Well, it's that compassion that he had for our students, and
He was very effective.
as I mentioned, we will discuss later the expansion that occurred. But one of the things, I think it's this next slide. Yeah, these are the name changes throughout the year, and as we said earlier, the school was founded as National School of Business in 1965, not long after Harold Buckingham purchased the university. It became the National College of Business, and then National College, and then National American University. And what I like about the name changes, at least seeing them all in one place, is that you can really see that the changes reflect the school's evolution and expansion of focus.
That's exactly correct. It is an evolution of our institution and who we are and what we wanted to do and what we felt we needed to do.
Right. Moving away from business and expanding our programming to legal.
And university became really important to us. We were, other than a business college, not that there was anything wrong with that, but we were more than that. We were moving in the way of university.
Yeah. Robin has a quick question. Was Nancy Hauer a Buckingham? Nancy was.
She was a Buckingham, yes.
Is she married to?
I don't think I can sort that out.
Okay. She was a Buckingham though, Robin.
Yes.
I can give you specifics after the webinar. I'm trying to, I know she was married to John Howard.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
That's right. And John Howard and I were fraternity brothers
no, yeah,
at Butler University,
Yeah.
and we were pretty close
pretty tight. Yeah.
throughout.
And John is a former president of National American University.
Yes.
So
Yes.
I want to say Nancy was, I think I'm sorting it out. Nancy Robin was Harold's daughter.
Yes.
Oh, she was Robin's speech instructor at the time
I didn't know
in
that.
1983.
But
Good.
that makes
Interesting.
sense.
Yeah.
She was a good instructor. She taught speech.
Yeah. Yep.
And she was very conscientious about it.
Yeah.
It was not just a whim for
Mhm.
her.
Mm-hmm.
She presented that as a very important part of her education,
Yeah.
her educational
Mm-hmm.
structure.
Mm-hmm. Well, Robbins remembers her to. Yep. Robin says she was. Yeah. That's good. Thanks,
No
Robin.
argument.
All right, we will move on. This is something that Robin might also remember fondly, the athletics and intramurals. The university today, how it looks today, is very different than how it looked in the 60s through about the 90s.
Yeah.
We early on, and then I'm going to turn this over to you, Guy, because we could probably do a whole hour on NAU sports with you in the room. Clarence Jacobson did have a, as you can see in the picture there, a basketball team in the 40s and the 50s. There was also, some recreational opportunities for students through bowling, swimming, roller skating, and the like. But our sports program really got started with rodeo.
That's true. And it was not the only thing that we did, but it was a very important part of our programming. And our recruitment often related to the background of these individuals into what they did on the ranch, and they came in and did it for us.
Mm-hmm.
And our rodeo program, or things related to the farm and ranch, were again who we were and what we were doing. And rodeo was, we were very good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And we jumped right into it, and there wasn't anything to hold us back. We knew what we were doing.
And did very well. You won national championships and finished top 10 nearly every season.
Throughout.
Yeah.
Throughout.
We also had soccer and basketball. Basketball we were particularly passionate about, being a Hoosier.
That's right. I mean, that's where I come from, Indiana-wise.
Yeah.
And our basketball program was really good, and our soccer program was really good. And Frank Bettis, I may have ruined the name, but Frank was the coach on the soccer team.
Mm-hmm.
And then we got into basketball, and we had a gymnasium, which came with that part of the building.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a gym, and we scheduled people that we probably shouldn't have,
Mm-hmm.
but we scheduled them, and we'd win.
Oh, the teams, you mean the caliber of teams? Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Surprising them as much as you?
That's right. Yeah. Like School of Mines.
Yeah.
I mean, they came in with the idea that who are these people? Who do they think they are?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll take care of that. Well, they didn't take care of it.
Yeah.
Because we had good programming, and we had good coaches, and we recruited people that would want to do that kind of thing. And we were pretty good in soccer, and we were pretty good in basketball, and we were pretty good in a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, and did you mention volleyball? You might have just mentioned volleyball too. That was the other sport that we were really, in addition to rodeo, we were really known for.
Yeah, the girls didn't lose.
Yeah.
They did not lose.
Mm-hmm.
And we had championship teams in volleyball, and the young lady there at the bottom of the photograph was a great student and helped us establish who we were and what we were doing, and the impact that sport was having on our recognition.
Yeah. Now, I don't recall if you mentioned the gymnasium. Did you tell me, was it you that shared a story about Harold Buckingham and the gymnasium, or was that somebody else?
I don't know, but I'm not sure where we're going with that. But I explained to him that I had to have a gym.
Yeah, that's where I'm going with that. Yeah.
And I needed it recreationally,
Mm-hmm.
and more so than anything else, I wanted to play basketball. And that comes from my background
Mm-hmm.
in the state of Indiana. I mean, if you didn't play basketball, you didn't understand.
Right. Right.
We were pretty good, and our gym was not the best, but it wasn't bad.
Yeah.
We had first kind of a slick floor, and then we replaced that with wooden floor and good nets and good bank boards and good coaches, and our scheduling
Mm-hmm.
put us up against everybody that was better than we were.
Yeah.
Until we beat them.
Yeah, that's right.
And that happened a lot.
You played to your competition and then some.
Yeah. Well,
you mentioned that when we were talking earlier, you mentioned the gym, which recalled the memory of Harold Buckingham's role in that. But it also served for our intramural. It was a space for our intramural clubs, which were plentiful in the 90s especially. Some of this came from Guy's book Milestone, but I also looked through some past yearbooks, and I was surprised at all that was offered in the 90s. I mean, the Vets Club was probably the most active.
They were very dynamic,
Mm-hmm.
and they were older, young men, and they helped to lead us in a variety of directions, all of which was contributing to who we were and what we were trying to do.
Yeah.
And we had all manner of social occasions, the Queen contests and etc.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, as an alumni relations director, I would love to have this sort of level of activity, but the university then is a different university than it is now. We serve so many online students, and we provide a service really to those for whom, in Harold Buckingham's vision, an opportunity for higher education for those that might not otherwise have that opportunity. So no regrets, but this must have been a very fun time.
Yeah, and the other organization, the second one down, Vets Club,
Mm-hmm.
we had a lot of military people coming to NAU or NCB, whatever happened to be at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And that bottom picture is the Vets Club.
Yeah.
And they did all kinds of good things for the community, for the college, for each other.
Mm-hmm.
And the girls had their, what do you call it, programs in their sorority.
Mm-hmm.
Building enthusiasm and doing the right thing. And we had the Queen contests, and we had a lot of student organizations. All of the organizations were contributive.
Yeah.
And we had a newspaper, and we had a yearbook, and we had a wives club, and we had sororities and Bible study and etc.
Yeah.
We were pretty active, and that's what we needed to do.
Yeah. It was an interesting time for sure. A lot of fun. Well, we'll move on now to accreditation, which seems like a much drier topic, but as Guy can share, there were a lot of challenges and opportunities around the accreditation process. And I have on the screen our milestones. We really, throughout our history, have worked very hard to secure accreditation as a business school, later as programs through regional accreditation entities. But that hasn't come easy, has it, Guy?
No, no, not at all. And I think we had envisioned what we wanted to do and how we were going to do it, and that meant an impact as a senior college of business. Mm-hmm. And our graduates, or even the dropouts, could continue elsewhere and did fine because our educational background was consistent with where they might go. Mm-hmm.
So the accreditation process was important to the university to ensure we were providing the quality education we promised.
Right. That's right.
And I know we've talked a little bit about the differences or the challenges that a proprietary or nonprofit school might have, or for-profit school might have as compared to a state university.
Yeah, we had to fight that a lot, and I don't know why we had to fight it, because it didn't alter who we were at all. In fact, it was a positive mm-hmm. Impact on the nature of our programming and the educational classes and the organizations. It was part of what we were doing.
Yeah, but we were in a position to really prove ourselves in a way that maybe wasn't asked of public universities or nonprofit.
And we had a number of older students. We had a number of veterans mm-hmm. coming back from military and knowing that they needed education, and mm-hmm. lo and behold, they came to us. Mm-hmm. And we didn't have to fight with them.
Right.
They established a veterans club.
Well, our conversation keeps going back to Harold Buckingham, but really since 1941, NAU has had open enrollment for the very reason that we didn't want to have to turn anyone away. And even to this day, we have students who I think the average age of our student is in the mid 30s. Most are working full-time, have families. Many are in the military. Mm-hmm. I think over time the age of our student has increased, but really the circumstances or the challenges of accessing education for them hasn't, and we've been that university for them.
There was an interaction and a relationship because of the Air Force Base.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And
next door to us,
right.
And they came to us.
Yes.
And they became part of our student body and part of our leadership, and a real advantage.
Yeah, and that's actually a perfect segue into our next, in our last section. I mentioned we talk about NAU's expansion throughout the years. This is a map of where we're located now. We have 35 locations across the central U.S. But Ellsworth, as you were just saying, was the first of our remote campuses.
That's right.
That period of time from 74 to 75 was a period of relatively significant growth, in that those were the first year in 2 years that we really decided that our footprint needed to be beyond Rapid City.
Yeah, we moved into Colorado, mm-hmm. and we're welcomed mm-hmm. in Colorado, and then it became New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And we grew in that context, and that did us a lot of good.
Well, we were bringing, the model was really to provide a place that our students could call home in their own neighborhoods. That's so right. we wanted to serve a population, again, beyond Rapid City, and even nationally. And the best way to do that was to establish sort of home campuses in those students' communities.
That's a good way to put it, because that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And that gave us strength.
Yeah, that's right. Um, Again, just to, you can see with the dates, the periods of more significant expansion. That 74 to 75 year period, we gained several locations, and then it wasn't again until 1990.
And you work it's down to
Right.
212.
Right.
And we grew.
Yes.
Without much difficulty. We had a lot of support and a lot of interest.
Right.
And of course that interest helped us establish our income, which allowed us to do all kinds of things that we might not have been able to do otherwise.
Increase our programming, serve more students, increase where we're, expand our locations. One important note on this timeline that I probably could have devoted a whole section to is the distance learning campus. Mm-hmm. The advent of online learning. We were one of the earliest leaders in providing a model of education that didn't require that a student go to a campus, go to a physical location. Yeah. Today we have a blend. We have many online students, but as I mentioned, we have 35 ground locations at Well that serve students, and some of those students, many of our students will have a blended curriculum.
That's right.
They'll take some classes online and others will go to their campus for classes. So it really is a flexible model to serve our students and their lifestyles, their jobs, their families, the different things they're dealing with.
Cooperative interaction.
Yeah, yep.
We did well in that context.
Yeah. So it's all been about the students, Guy. We've been doing this for 75 years. It started with Clarence going, I have one legacy alum who talks about him almost getting stuck in the mud in his truck getting to her farmhouse, to Harold Buckingham to today. We're really, the student is the center of everything we do. I've had the privilege of serving NAU now for 2 years in the Alumni Relations Department and for Foundation Services. You know, I can tell you that was like the first thing that someone said to me, and I still hear it every day, that it's the students that we have in mind.
Yeah, that's right.
So,
and they figured out pretty quickly that if they needed help, we could help them. Mm-hmm. We could help all kinds of things. It was in our best interest to support these students in what they wanted to do and what they wanted to be in their education and the organizations and the interaction with other students. Yeah. And that's what we were doing.
It was the right thing to do, and they, you know, those who have gone on to satisfying careers, and many have really turned out to be great ambassadors for the university as well.
Yeah, and to keep it even more narrow, my son and daughter were graduates here.
Yeah.
And they've done really well.
Yeah.
One in terms of tourism and another in terms of business. And
yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, we have, well, to that same point, we have many employees many employees were first introduced at NAU as students and are now working for the university.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of pride. That we've been talking for about 40 minutes. Hard to believe that went fast. We do have time for questions. Robin, if you've got any either memories you'd like to share or questions that you'd like to ask, we'd be happy to hear them. It's been nice visiting with you, Guy, and
thank you.
Getting your recollections from your 50 years here. That's amazing.
Well, the institution means a lot to me, and I've learned a lot in growing up with NAU, and we've done a lot of good things, and it is a matter of service, educational service and support. Yeah. And we had all manner of supporting programs and opportunities. And so I think we've done things well, and we've done things right, and we're still growing.
We're still going, hopefully for many more years. Robin does have a good question. She asked about the original Rapid City campus, which had been sold. I'll answer your question, Robin. I'll say first, though, that the original campus was a much smaller building on St. Joe Street across from the courthouse.
Mm-hmm.
About the time that Clarence Jacobson was preparing to sell the university, he had also purchased land for the much larger campus on the other side, on Kansas City Street, on the other side of the courthouse. He had even broken ground as Harold Buckingham was preparing to purchase it. Robin, you're asking about the Kansas City location, the Rapid City campus, which we were in that location for 50 years, actually. I looked up that earlier. For 50 years, we were on Kansas City Street. It was a much larger campus. It was sold in 2012, or we relocated in 2012 to the current location on Mount Rushmore Road. I believe that the Kansas City campus is now being used by Pennington County for crisis intervention. So it's kind of a one-stop shop for people who are dealing with addiction issues and other kinds of crisis situations that they go for their help and support. There was quite a bit of news around the gymnasium that we talked about earlier. There was a church that wanted to use the gymnasium and was preparing I think it was worked out that they could purchase it for almost a donation. It was an extremely low bid just to make the transaction official, but finally I think it went into the hands of a church who will use it for their youth programs. You mentioned Diana Hall, Robin does. That was one of was it our first residential hall?
Yes.
Yeah. And that I think Harold, excuse me for interrupting, Harold Buckingham is credited for building Diana Hall.
Yeah, yeah. And then it added a wing.
Yeah.
Which had kitchenettes.
Oh, yeah.
And made it much more attractive to those that were trying to save money and do the right thing. And
oh, sure.
And 2 wings became 3 wings, and the third wing had the kitchenettes, and it was part of who we were and what we were doing.
Made it easier for students
Absolutely.
to live and thrive. She was in, Robin says she was in 4th West. It's interesting how memories of dorm life and college life are often so central to where you lived and the sports teams that you followed. And I mean, that was in the clubs that you joined, just like Robin's recalling now. That's really a lot of our graduates from the 70s, 80s, and 90s. That's their connection, their memory of NAU.
Some of the best friends that anyone has in college came from interaction as part of a sports team or as part of a roommate group or
absolutely.
Whatever else.
I mean, you mentioned John. It goes way back to Butler, John Howard, all the way back to Butler University.
John and I were fraternity brothers.
But you're right, those are how memories are made. It's those personal connections. So.
And my other best friend, we went in the Navy together, and he was better than I was and lasted longer. Anyway, it's part of who we are and what we do.
Yeah. Well, you're a big part of who we are and what we do, Guy. Really.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate your time today and sharing your wisdom, your memories, insights that really nobody else has. So much of that is captured in your milestones book, for which we're all grateful. And we've got a little bit of that history here today, too, through this conversation. So
thank you. That's very nice of you to say that.
Well, it's genuine. I appreciate it very much. If there are no further questions, I am going to conclude the webinar, but thank you again, Guy, and my contact information is online if there are any follow-up questions from Robin or anyone else. Thank you again, Guy.
Thank you.